I'm muted.
Morning. Afternoon.
Well, good afternoon.
Afternoon, morning. What day is it? It's Tuesday.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Good.
We've got a bunch of people probably jumping on here, so we're going to kind of just go with the flow. Oh, somebody just got a kiss on WebEx. Yay.
No, that's, where's your volume? Oh, right here, right here. And how do you
There's Millie McDonald. Hi, Millie.
Okay.
There's
Here's the
the
volume.
jumping on.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, oh, I love your background, Shanna.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. We appreciate you being patient. We literally just had a whole bunch of people in our other Zoom room, which rubbed up against this time. And so welcome. I'm Shanna. I'm the president and CEO here at the Chamber. It's nice to see some familiar faces remotely. As we wait for folks to join, Jill, I can tell folks how you get to a background like this. You might already know it.
Yeah, tell everybody, share.
So if you go down and for folks who are new to Zoom, if you drag your mouse down, that little black bar at the bottom of your screen pops up and there's a mute button to your left. I tend to start these with everybody on mute so they can find their way in from their background noise so that you get that option. And then right next to that is the video icon, and there's a little pop-up menu right next to it. And behind there's a choose a virtual background. And you can choose one of the ready-made ones, or you can upload a photo, hi from outer space. Yep, so we have a couple of different ones. I used this one the other day with my team to let you think that I'm in the boardroom with people appropriately distanced. I promise it's a file photo and everybody is safely working remote. But that's how I got our background. And some folks on my team have been really good about whipping those backgrounds up with logos from our presenters. So Jill, if you do another one and you want us to create you a background screen, we're happy to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good internal competition to see who can get the best background.
I was on a call the other day and we had a member from space, somebody at Yankee Stadium, somebody on the beach, and somebody at a birthday party.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, you can have a lot of fun with it. And I promise we won't be quizzing anyone if they're wearing pants today. Won't ask anyone to stand up to prove it. In this day and age, it just matters that you look good from the waist up, friends.
That's right.
So that's where we're at. We are recording this so that we can make this available to folks afterwards. So I would kind of call that out. And it looks like we've got 8 folks on, and I think that might be just about our full room, Jill. So
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you in just a moment. Can I offer a couple of contextual pieces for everyone as we get underway? So if this is, and I think you're going to hear a lot about this from Jill, I just want to make sure we all have a baseline set of information. So I do start these with everybody on mute. You are able to unmute yourself. And so again, to do that, you just kind of drag your mouse down and the bar will pop up at the bottom of your Zoom screen in case you're using split screens. And there's a mute button. You can click that to unmute yourself or to mute yourself. You can turn your video on or off just next to that to the right. But what I like to point out for some of these, our last one had 78 people in it. It was about employment law. And so in a group this size, Jill, and I'll leave this up to you, of course, but you are absolutely able to maybe talk and participate in the room. For larger groups, we use the chat function. And so if you continue along the bottom of the screen, right in the center, you'll see that green share arrow button. Right to the right of that is the chat button. And so I'm gonna ask everyone to type your name and your organization in there, and that lets us know not only who's in the room, but that you know how to use the chat function. This is a good place for us to record questions that you had. We are able to reply to questions. Jill, I'm happy to keep an eye on the question and chat box to help you out while you're paying attention to the things that you're doing, so you don't have to worry about it. So that's a little bit about how we are managing some of our new virtual reality that we all find ourselves in. Jill, would you like your ability to share your screen, or are you presenting just kind of like this?
I would love the ability to share the screen. I do have a PowerPoint and some visual things to show everybody. And then Afterwards, I'm happy to make the deck available to send out to the participants so that they have it as a reference point.
That sounds great. I think you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I think I can. I'm going to try.
Haven't locked it up.
All right, and then, hold on, and then we're gonna make it a slideshow, so bear with me.
Great job.
Okay, so I can still see everybody and pictures, so if you make faces at me, I'll be able to see that, but hopefully everybody can see my screen. And if we have folks who join late, I'm sure they can catch up, and as Shanna said, we're recording, so the great thing maybe is that this will live in posterity. So it's nice to see some familiar faces out there. Let me just give you a brief introduction and talk a little bit about the basis for today's discussion. And because we are a small group, I would love for folks to be able to interact and ask questions as we go along. But first, I just want to introduce myself. That's not me, that's my dog, Dobby. My name is Jill Parker. My company is Inspireal. And what I do is I help companies to create great work environments. I've worked for big companies for a long time. And I've been super fortunate in the past year to start my own business and consulting with organizations on various ideas for how to create great work environments. And then with the advent of coronavirus and this new virtual work world that we live in, I had, talked with Scott and Shanna, and we thought that this would be a good, meaningful topic for folks to talk about and to have a webinar on. And I hope you find it impactful, and I hope you walk away with at least one thing that you say, okay, well, I'm going to try that, or that's kind of an interesting concept. So we're gonna share a bunch of ideas today. That is Dobby Parker, my chief cuteness officer. He's a lot better looking than I am, and he's really the brains behind the operation. And if you follow me on Instagram, you get to see a lot of him. But let's just talk about the current situation real quick. It's unprecedented, and we're not going to talk about COVID. You hear enough about that from everybody else. But what I think is most important to keep in mind is that we've never seen anything before like this in our lifetimes. And it's, as business owners, as business leaders, as community members, we have to focus on what can we do about it and how can we help. And that was really the genesis of this discussion, as well as some other discussions that I'm holding with various organizations, is just thinking about, what can we do? And when we're in a situation where we suddenly have a remote workforce, how are we adapting our leadership style to approach that? It was funny, I got an email this morning from a company called Leadership Essentials, and it was called How to Set Up a Remote Team. And I laughed and chuckled a little bit, and I was like, day late and a dollar short, that would have been helpful 2 weeks ago, and it gave all these great steps, like you should take a test run, and you should make sure that you've got a solid communication strategy and all of these things. And the thing that I thought about was a lot of us didn't have that luxury. We were just sort of thrust into this because, overnight, it became very, 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 very clear that we were going to need to deploy our folks in a remote manner. So, everything changed overnight. And we transitioned people from an office environment, we sent them home very, very quickly. And many of us, probably many of you, spent days just trying to figure out, okay, how do we get everybody connected? How do we make sure everybody can get on the server? So you had all of those technical things that some of us are still working through. And then additionally, you had the whole idea of, do people have the ability to work from home? Do they have the space? Do they have the time? I mean, daycares are closed, doggy daycares are closed. There's people who are now trying to work their full-time job at home while also homeschool their children. So you know, this guy in this picture, that's very real. And he looks like he's having way more fun than I think some people are having in this new world order. So, you know, I think it's not as simple as just transitioning people to work from home. I think there's a lot of other considerations, and that's really what I want to talk about today. So we're going to focus on a couple key topics, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions too, because I want to make sure that you know, we're addressing some of the concerns that you all have. So when I think of the considerations, and you'll see that big frowny face because it's a stressful time, but really the things that I am advising, you know, business owners, leaders, managers to think about are communication, which is obviously probably what I would say is the most critical, technology, collaboration, productivity, and then that culture piece and stress are key considerations that should not be, you know, ignored or disregarded in the interest of, okay, well, we got the technical stuff all resolved, so we're fine and everybody's working from home. I guess what I'd love to do is just sort of throw it out to the group right now and say, are those some of the concerns that we're saying? You can nod your head or you can unmute yourself and jump on, but are those some of the things that you find yourself thinking about as you kind of navigate this new environment?
Jill,
Yeah.
before you would get into that, when my screen came up, the people were covering much of the right-hand side of what you were presenting. If that's other people are doing that, you can put view options at the top and go side by side, and that will uncover your screen.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, that's a good idea. I move everybody around on my screen. It's very Brady Bunch. Everybody's sort of on top of each other, like on the beginning. I'm dating myself by mentioning the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, I think what you're covering for me looks reasonable. I've used Zoom a few times. I'm about to start leading some groups with it, so that's what I'm for tips on that. And
Good.
We've so far found this extremely useful. So thank you.
Good. Good. Well, let's get into it. And, you know, communication is probably the biggest, and there's a lot to that. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. But what I want to I just want to start real quick and talk about technology. You know, there's no doubt when you think about technology, you know, if you outsource or you have an in-house IT department, they are your best friend right now because they're making sure that whoever does work for you is able to hopefully access your systems. They're making sure that you right now sitting at your kitchen table or in your home office are able to access the necessary systems. But it's important that you continue to have ongoing conversations regarding how well is your current technology equipped to handle remote work. You have to think about things like secure connections. You have to think about, can employees access all the systems? You know, sometimes people use multiple platforms in their work if they're working on a computer, and sometimes they might not be able to access certain systems remotely, and can you modify their access? One key point that I like to point out when we talk about the technology piece, which I think is so important, is the security. And if you're not having a conversation with your IT people about security, you know, that is a very important conversation and documentation of how you're securing any client data or people data or employee data. You know, I spoke with a woman the other day who is working remotely, and she's like, oh, thank God I got set up and I'm all set up to work remote, and I'm using my husband's laptop. And I'm like, okay. And, you know, I'm like, well, is password protected? Yes. Okay. But, you know, is that the family laptop? Does everybody use that laptop? And those are the types of questions that you have to ask. And then, you know, through further discussion, it turns out that, you know, her husband is in the medical profession and also uses that laptop to access patient portal, which is HIPAA protected information. So, you know, you have all of these things at play, And then, you know, you also can't have grandpa getting on that same laptop and playing solitaire at night. You know, you've got to protect that information and data, and also think about how does your team make notes. You know, I'm working with a company where they often use just like Microsoft Notes to make notes about client communication, which is fine when they're on the company network. But at home on a personal computer, you really don't want storage of client information or potential private information being saved on that sort of thing. So you have to really think about how client information is protected. And I'm not a security expert. My expertise, I like to think, is in the area of leading and managing human capital. But I will say that those are just some things that you want to think about from a technology perspective. And making sure that you have the right tools to secure information. And then as you think even further, you've got to think about, do you have the right tools for your team to collaborate? We're going to talk a lot about collaboration. One word on bandwidth, and this is no joke. Bandwidth is probably the biggest challenge. I got on this call and told my whole family, nobody streams for the next hour. And I have great internet, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't cut out while I was leading this discussion. But, you know, not everybody has great internet. You know, you may have an employee who lives out in Green or Turner, they might be on DSL. They may have a partner who's also working from home who's sucking up some bandwidth, plus their 8th grader needs to upload that book report on the French Revolution to school to make sure that they get their assignments in on time. Plus they're trying to keep their 4-year-old occupied with Baby Shark videos. All of that is sucking bandwidth. So you have to look at it sort of in the aggregate and say, you know, the bandwidth that your team may have at home may be limited. And that means you may need to be flexible with how and when they do get their work done, if that makes sense. Any questions or thoughts on that?
I think the point about stable internet is something that folks, I think it's an important thing to remember. I know as I'm sending out Zoom links, I'm sharing to folks that they should be making sure that they have stable internet or data if they're using it, and that they have a web-enabled camera. And I think one of the things that can be easy to forget when you're convening folks with this new technology or new to them technology is sending them a little reminder in advance or giving them the ability to test it out before they're all facing each other goes a long way in making people just feel more comfortable. Absolutely.
And, you know, you got to, I think it's also helpful to be creative with people. You know, we have a group of people who, you know, one woman was saying, listen, the bandwidth isn't great. She's like, can I do my work after my kids go to bed at 8 o'clock? And, you know, because the type of work she does isn't client facing, it's more of data centric. She said, I would love to do my work between the hours of 8 p.m. and midnight because nobody else in my house is on my internet connection. And, you know, that is the most unorthodox request, but, you know, as an employer, that's the right thing to do. And it helps her to be able to keep working and get creative. Another organization, I just share these anecdotes with you just so you can get a feel for how creative, you know, I know of a call center that deployed their call center employees home and everybody has access, but there's a couple people who they just do not have the bandwidth in their home to be able to take calls, but they want to continue to work. And they actually paired them up with other employees. And, you know, it was one of these situations where a guy in the office says, listen, I've got this big house. I work in the basement. There's a room on the 3rd floor where you can come in. We don't even have to see each other. You could use my 3rd floor as an office when you want to work and use my internet and be able to continue to work. That's the kind of creativity that we're seeing here in the era of social distancing, but also getting creative, because otherwise that person would have had to basically either come into the office, which is not optimal, or have to go on some type of leave or request time off, and the company would have to figure out how to handle that. So this was just a creative way for them to work around it. Doesn't work for everybody, but there's a lot of creativity happening out there.
Yeah, Jill, if I could, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
City of Lewiston had a joint meeting last night with the school board, and we did a trial run in the afternoon prior to doing a big Zoom meeting with many, many participants. So I think your idea of the trial runs just really puts a lot of people at ease that haven't necessarily done a lot of technology. So I just wanted to share that. The other thing that's kind of unique to this situation is that I work within the field of healthcare, and a lot of the regulations have been lifted for a 90-day period. They've been waived, I should say, simply because the offices of Maine Care and the Department of Education, they want us to see our patients, and so they're really supporting a variety of telehealth platforms without imposing a lot of regulations. And so that's been something. And then the other piece that we've uncovered here locally is just some of the families that we want to reach out to don't necessarily have those resources. And so Spectrum has been really generous. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but they're offering like a 90-day Wi-Fi. There's some stipulations, but it's pretty easy to get for our families who do need to be contacted and don't have that opportunity to do so otherwise. So I just wanted to share those findings.
Thank you for that. And I think those are all great points. And, whether it's for schooling or for work or for connectivity or for healthcare, I know I had to, have a check-in with my doctor, and it's amazing how quickly they're transitioning to telemedicine. Right. And I think that there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of ingenuity that's being employed pretty quickly here. And I know the schools are also providing some hotspots, and companies are providing hotspots for folks. So if they don't have a great internet connectivity, maybe they could use a hotspot. So there's a lot of great stuff, and I think there's a lot we can all learn from each other there. Thinking about collaboration, that's the thing that most organizations will say is the thing that they worry about with sort of sending everybody out into the vapor to work on their own. And, I'm an extrovert. And let me tell you, the extroverts are struggling here in this new world order. Yes, exactly, Amy, right? It's real. There's a level of isolation that happens, and it's amazing that it happens so quickly. Now, for some people, they're saying, this is my dream. I don't have to talk to anybody, and I could just stay home in my pajamas with no pants on. Isn't that fantastic? But you want to make sure, I think one of the things that I think everybody is focusing on is how can we still collaborate and not lose the idea sharing that we get from working closely with people. And I know, if you ever walk into the chamber offices, Scott is there, Shanna is there, and the whole team, and there's usually hallway conversations happening, and somebody's like, hey, weren't we going to try that? And then somebody else pops up and that sort of thing. And when you deploy your entire workforce out into separate, brick and mortar locations, you lose some of that. So I think it's important to think about, your current meeting cadence and making sure that you're still meeting as a group, but that doesn't mean you keep all the same meetings. You're probably, we all said there's a lot of meetings that could be an email. I think this is the time to, figure out what's most impactful for meetings. Maybe you partner people up. A friend of mine and I, who both work independently, actually connected on Zoom yesterday and did our work with the Zoom call just open. So we had some interaction. So maybe you partner team members up. There's ways you can sort of get connected virtually. Maybe it's you send out a question of the day to your team to continue idea sharing. And we're going to talk about this in just a minute or two. I'm going to give you some just ideas and examples of things to do to create central places where folks can continue to communicate as they work together. Because you want a place, let's face it, let's say we were all working on a project on this fine team and we just completed the project. If we were all in the office, we'd probably be celebrating in some way the completion of the project. So how do you make the high fives virtual? How do you make the we did it celebration virtual? And how do you make sure that you can have that connectivity to create and collaborate and communicate as well as crowdsourcing solutions, because you know, that's some of what could potentially get lost as we kind of move into these very, you know, sort of more isolated situations. I want to talk a little bit about productivity, and then we're going to get into communication. But productivity, you know, that's every leader's fear is people working from home won't work as hard as they do in the office, which I have successfully debunked on several occasions in my career. But you know, I think that what folks need to focus on right now is getting folks set up to be able to work from home, and to ensure that you have a way to measure productivity. But on day 5 is not the day to start sending around reports that shows who's not being as productive as everybody else. Unfortunately, I saw an email from a leader to a team the other day that was, hey, everybody, now that everyone's working from home, I want you to know that every Friday I'll be pulling productivity reports. It's critical that we stay productive, because if not, we could lose clients. And my advice to that leader is that's not where you go from the jump. You start with the trust of, we know this is hard. We know that there's some distractions happening. Obviously, we want to be as productive as possible, but you want to, as I said in that third belt, stay positive, not punitive. What you will find, I believe, is that there will be some productivity declines, but it's going to be important for you to be more of a questioner than anything else, to be able to say, hey, how's that schedule working for you? Or, you know, I've noticed it's, you know, normally you handle about 5 files a day, you're only handling about 2. Is your connectivity a challenge? Let's ask some questions. I do not believe now is the time to start spurring productivity through fear. But you do need, you know, we all need to start planning for how will you address productivity declines if they occur. And really it's a question of, let's get to the bottom of where you know, why and why those productivity declines are happening. And if it seems like, as you kind of proceed, if it seems like you have someone who it's going to not be possible for someone to be productive in their home environment, then you need to work with that person to make decisions, because obviously there needs to be some productivity expectations, but you want to work with them to try and accommodate them. Maybe it is hey, I'd rather work in the evenings when you know, I'm not trying to help my kids with their schoolwork, or kind of work Saturdays and Sundays, if that's an option, because, you know, on those days, my husband takes the kids out to camp or whatever it might be. You know, looking for ways to break down barriers, as opposed to, you know, sort of the punitive, okay, you can work from home, but you better work hard, because that rarely works. And again, when we talk a little bit about stress, the last thing that anybody needs right now is to be at home just completely wigging out, because they feel like their job is not secure. And, you know, we all live in the real world, but I think a true leader right now, people will remember how you led, and that's going to be by being a human being. Any questions or thoughts before we talk a lot more about communication?
Thank you, Jill. You're validating what our team has been doing, so I really appreciate that.
Good.
One of the questions was platforms. At United Way, we use Teams, and that can come in really handy in having isolated group conversations with the team that you're working on. But also it allows me to do things like a lunch check-in with everybody, and you can pop in, you can say hi, we're doing silly things. We're also being really conscious about meeting overload, screen overload, and basically too much communication. So we're limiting it to, you know, 1 all staff email a day if we need to, you know, limiting our all staff gatherings to maybe once a week. So we're trying to be cognizant of both, of making sure everybody has enough information. And we've set up a folder for staff resources for everything from medical to family resources for maybe a spouse who's no longer working. So we've set up resources that staff can use as well. But very planful. We had a week of testing and trial, and now we're sort of getting into a smooth rhythm. But like you said, we're also cognizant that people have children at home and maybe both partners are working. And so I have a couple of staff who are flexing time, and I'm going to put the baby down for a nap now while you get some work done. Next nap time is mine to get some work done. So as long as we don't have super tight deadlines for things, we're just letting people do what they need to do.
That's great. And it is a learn as you go. When you think about communication, it sounds like you're proactive, and that is my biggest piece of advice to anyone in any type of either leadership role or even as a member of a team, is that communication as a leader, your team needs to hear from you now more than ever. And it should be two-way. It shouldn't be, let me deliver to you down from on high, here's how we're handling this crisis. I want it, there should be the invitation to the team to also bubble up concerns. You want to stay positive, but everything's not coming up roses. So you have to be honest with folks about challenges and share successes. And as I said, above all, be human. And when I think about communication, and like I said, I'll send this deck out because this is kind of tiny for everybody, but I think that if you lead a team of people, I'm sure you've sent out communication to your folks about what's happening, but really think about a regular cadence. Think about making sure that it has strikes the right balance between an update and an expectation. I always go with the strategy of start with a thank you. This message is first to thank you all so much for your adaptability during what are weird days. And it's okay to say this is weird. Hey guys, this is uncharted territory. I'm learning as I go. It's great to give an update. 80% of our team is now working remote. We're really getting the job done. Maybe provide a business outlook. Give folks some understanding of, I talk to a lot of our clients and, the work is going to keep coming. We have a great opportunity to satisfy our clients and, be confident and express confidence and trust in your team, not doubt. Trust was never more important than it is right now, because I think we all want to trust that whatever relationships we're in are going to sort of weather this storm, and most definitely a working relationship is one of those. Think about the strategy for connectivity and, set expectations. If you haven't yet said to your team, hey guys, you can expect an email from me every Friday telling you what's happening. And every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're gonna have a quick 15-minute Zoom call just to check in and see how everybody's doing, or whatever that cadence may be. And again, continue to thank people for their flexibility, and also, excuse me, be flexible if somebody says, well, gosh, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m., that's when my kids are getting all their assignments. That's not going to work for me. You've got to be flexible with that. Excuse me. Maybe tell a client story. If you talk to a client and a client says, hey, Jill, I really appreciate the way inspireal is handling this. You guys have been top notch. That is a great thing to be sharing in your weekly email. I talked to Joe at Consolidated, and he just absolutely was blown away with how quickly we pulled this together, guys. Thank you so much. And then I think that, one of the recommendations that I've made to a lot of my clients is also start to prepare for a world where we all come back together. And what I mean by that is that, part of that optimism or part of that expectation is, I can't wait till we're all back in the office again together and we can celebrate. We'll have a big beer and pizza party or punch and cake or whatever it might be. But set those expectations. And then you'll notice I say thank them again. And at least 3 points, thank them. I don't think there's such a thing as too much appreciation right now as people navigate this. I mean, obviously you're going to have outliers. You're going to have folks on your team who you're like, gosh, I don't know, Sally's really, I don't think she's able to stay engaged with work with what's going on at home. But I think what I'm hearing from many people in the community is the resilience that people are demonstrating is pretty amazing. So as you think about communication, make sure that you're showing appreciation for that. It shouldn't just be all business. It should be, guys, I really appreciate the way that you've all kind of come together. And email communication is a great way to do it. Obviously, web conferencing is an awesome way to communicate. Obviously you want to set expectations for your web conferences. I think many of you said it's great if you can kind of do a test drive. But if you're going to do web conferencing, you need to make sure that folks understand that, it's like being at a meeting at work. I was on a web conference the other day and there was a guy and he's sitting in his chair with his dog across his lap and he's sort of like in his pajamas. And I'm like, you would never walk into an in-person meeting looking like that. That was a great opportunity for me to be like, dude, your dog looks really good in the meeting, but I wouldn't have expected that in an in-person meeting. And it was, certainly you want to make sure you set those expectations with people. I think it's great to set the expectation of video on for everyone, if that's your culture. Because, again, when you're talking about web conferencing for connectivity, it's great to be able to see people. I did say to somebody, I got on a web conference the other day and it was sort of last minute. It was, hey, Jill, can you jump on this? And I did not look put together like I look so put together right now. I looked more like that picture on the right there. And I asked the question, I said, would it be okay if I didn't put my video on? I just got done working out and I haven't showered yet. And they were like, oh, that's fine. But, those are the types of things that you would just have that conversation about. Trying different activities to get folks engaged. Use that chat function, but with guardrails, because you don't want the chat to necessarily start to be just a free-for-all where people start having side conversations. And obviously you want to make them informative and fun. Because you want to have them be engaging so that when folks are on there, they feel like I'm getting something out of this, I'm learning something, and I have a clear call to action. Thoughts, questions, ideas so far? Okay, I want to talk a little bit about something that is a little controversial, but it's this idea of private Facebook groups as a way to communicate with your team. I've been using it with some of my clients because they are looking at, I think, Amy, you said you guys use Microsoft Teams. There are some small businesses that they don't currently have utilities within their existing systems with which to communicate with each other. So one low-cost option is to set up a private Facebook group with your team where the only people can only be found by those who are invited to the Facebook group. You could restrict it to be only your employees, and it is a place to share company information. Obviously, you would need to have some guidelines for this. You want to pay close attention, make sure it's private and not discoverable. But it can be a good place to collaborate if that fits with your culture. I set up, this is just sort of my pretend, I'm a team of 2 with me and my dog, so my team meetings are very, very small and simple. But I set this up just so you could see, you can set up a group where you could use it as a place to say, hey, we're gonna have a meeting. You can also celebrate things. You can see up in the upper left, we just signed the deal with Acme to market their anvils. So exciting, good job team. maybe it's public service announcements about snow. You can do polls, which I have found a lot of my clients are using that to say on their private Facebook group, we're thinking of having a meeting 3 times a week to stay connected. What's the best time for everybody? And they let everybody sort of vote on that. So there is utility in there for that type of thing. So private Facebook groups can be a great tool if that fits with your company culture, and if you don't have things like either Slack or Microsoft Teams or other types of collaboration tools for your folks to share ideas. And it can be secured in a way that, you know, only the folks from your company can get onto those groups. And when I said, you know, if it matches your culture, I think now is a great time to sort of assess your overall organizational culture. Amy, you were talking about United Way, and it sounds like you have a very collaborative culture. And obviously, it's important that your go-forward plan as you lead this remote workforce is respectful and honors that culture. So you're looking for ways to maintain that connectivity. And it's going to be through virtual tools, but it's also going to be through action and the action of the leadership team. I definitely encourage teams to look for ways to maintain that connectivity and celebrate success. Now is the perfect time to create new recognition programs, new ways to recognize folks for the hard work that they're doing, or engaging folks on how things are going. One of the things that I actually had talked about in a blog a few months ago was, as a leader or as a team member, if you want to recognize somebody's great performance, drop them a note, and not necessarily an email note. What if you actually, pulled out a card and an envelope and put a stamp on it? And imagine, going to your mailbox and getting either a thank you note or a recognition note from your coworker or manager via snail mail. That's something that doesn't happen every day. And it could be a creative way to recognize great performances. And then also, don't try and figure it all out yourself. I mean, if you have some creative folks on your team, leverage them to find creative ways to get folks engaged. I was talking with a leader the other day who has a team of about 22 people. They're all working from home. And she said, Joan on our team is the most creative. So I said, Joan, if we were going to be out of the office, all working remote for the next 12 weeks, how would you make sure that everybody stayed connected and we continued to grow as a team? And Joan came back with this plan that was, we're going to do this every Friday, and we're going to have a company online Scrabble tournament, and, we're going to have a virtual dance party on Thursdays at 5 and on Zoom and things like that. And some people will join and some people won't, but it was a variety of different things to try and keep people engaged. And then they sort of said, well, that won't work, that will work, that won't work. And they sort of whittled it down. But it wasn't that manager trying to figure out or boil the ocean or solve the world's problems. He leveraged people on his team who were super creative and could think of ways to further engage everybody. Using things like SurveyMonkey and sending out a survey to the team of what are the things you'd like to see? Do you want some professional development while you're working from home? Are there things that you'd like to see from us? There's another company that I know of that is doing that every Friday, one of their managers, it's a larger organization, one of their managers gives sort of the weekly address, and they have to write a poem, and they have to come up with a poem. And it's serving as a way to get people creative, but it's also making their management team a little bit more human. So thinking about culture and engagement is so important at this time. It's not the time to throw the culture out the window, if you will. Stress. let's talk just a little bit about stress, because I think for all of us, I think we should not underestimate the amount of stress that teams are under, people are under. And that's why the words "I understand" serve us all so well during these challenging times. It's important to lead with heart and not by fear. And your team and your teammates will remember how you led during this time. And the good news is that, you know, I sort of said this to my son this morning. We were talking about homes, you know, this remote school. And I said, well, you can kiss snow days goodbye, my friend, when life gets back to normal, because there's never going to be such thing as a snow day anymore. You're just going to have a remote school day, because we're sort of proving out the hypothesis that kids can learn remotely. This is some success, some not so successful. But it is definitely, this is a great litmus test for how you could use remote work in the future, particularly during times of stress for your employees or for the organization. And, you know, while it can be very challenging, there's also a great deal of opportunity here. There's an opportunity for you to lead well. There's an opportunity for your team to really understand more about the business, because they're seeing it done in a different way. And it's a chance for you to over communicate with your team in a way that maybe you haven't before, because you were so big, you know, everybody was just sort of in the business of doing business. And now we're really being thoughtful about how we approach the work environment and the culture. So I think that, you know, the way that we handle this stress can make companies more resilient and vibrant in the future as they move forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I think that there are benefits to working from home that will last long after, you know, the COVID pandemic. And, you know, I mean, the benefits are obviously the...
Jill?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. There's a couple of good questions about a topic that you are just covering as you move forward. I didn't know if you wanted to, so one of them is there another tool that can do things similar to Facebook groups, but is more private, and specifically meaning that it's either encrypted or not monitored by folks who might be mining data?
You know, Slack, Microsoft Teams are the other tools that I know of, but I would throw that out to the group and ask, are there other tools that your organizations are using?
So I'll answer from the Chamber's perspective.
Yeah.
We are a G Suite customer. That's our email, calendaring, storage, cloud tool. And we use G Chats, which is a really easy way to kind of internally, while we're working, cut down on the email to ask a quick question or to throw a link at somebody. And that's been really useful. In addition to that, you know, we can use Google Meets, which allows for internal, and there's, you know, a bunch of rooms, whereas with Zoom like this, we're limited to one kind of live room at a time with the package that we have, which is a pro package. And so we found Google Meets useful for internal dialogues. Those are available to folks with a regular Gmail and not a paid account. They're just more limited. And they've actually, Google has stepped up to the plate and changed that. Specifically around how they're mining our data, I don't know that they are mining our data in our Google Chats or in our Google Meets. I don't have any reason to believe so. There's a lot of alerts on the G Suite backend that tell you when something has been shared or accessed. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape that way. It's pretty encrypted. And then if others have ideas, that'd be great. If not, you've mentioned Slack now twice, Jill, and I think some folks are thirsting for a little more information on that.
Sure. And the G Suite is obviously a great tool, and as you said, I would imagine it's more secure than perhaps you know, some other solutions like a private Facebook group, because you're right, they are pretty they almost bug the heck out of you when they share your info. You know, you just shared your information with HubSpot. Did you mean to do that? So I think that's good. Slack is a instant messaging platform that is, it is typically used on the enterprise level. It's, you know, purchased by a business, and then everybody would have the ability to create, there's, you know, you can have multiple chats going at once. Slack is, you know, one resource I think that is probably a little bit more expensive. So certainly maybe for a larger organization. I actually liked your idea of the Google chat as an alternative to that, understanding that, you know, at this point, obviously people are very, very mindful of resources. So assuming that the challenge with Google, with the Google chat, and Shannon, maybe you can answer this for me, is you would have to have a Gmail account, correct?
You would need to have a Gmail account, but they are free. And you can get a Gmail account. So I think if you're in a small organization, or
Right.
and in all honesty, if you're trying to figure out what tools work best for you, I would highly encourage you to use a free and accessible format
Absolutely.
to find out if it works for you before you jump on board with a more paid version of anything.
I
Because
agree.
some of that's around how are your teams doing and coming up to speed. You know, some of it for us was just working through our team members. Our first, you know, virtual staff meeting was a lot of, hey, I don't think your microphone is working. Can you hear me? Like that's a very real piece of what it was. And so it was about making sure that folks are using the microphone on their monitor and not on their laptop if their laptop's closed, because it's, you know, 3 feet away now. And so I think it's those pieces, but you can sign up for a free Gmail account, get a feel for that. The Google Meet and Google Chat still available to you. And I think someone said in here that they preferred using Teams because you can use PowerPoint. For Google Meet, you don't get stuck using Google Slides. You can still share your screen and present and use PowerPoint on your own laptop or computer. And so that's, I think, something helpful for folks to know about. Like, do you have to adopt the full G Suite? And you really don't.
Right. Yeah, that's very helpful. And I agree with you. The, you know, and it is trial and error, because I also know, you know, there's one organization I'm working with that they, you know, when they first came out, it was, we're going to meet every day from 9:30 to 9:45 as a team on Zoom. And they did it for 4 or 5 days. And then it was kind of like, why are we doing this again? So, you know, you're going to try some things, and then you may, as, you know, as this sort of progresses, you may find that you're going to change. You don't have to be married to your, you know, your first approach, which might be, we're going to meet every day, or we're going to talk in the chat all day long. And then you're going to find that maybe that ebbs a little bit as folks get more comfortable, or as various other cadences come to fruition, if that makes sense. Benefits and challenges, you know, the benefits, and I strongly recommend that, you know, as an organization, you know, you want to have an organizational historian who is sort of recording all these things that you're doing and trying, and how did it work, and what happened, and that sort of thing. Because I guarantee you, at some point 2 years from now, when the world blessedly returns back to its normal day-to-day, somebody's going to say, remember that time when we tried and we used that tool, and how did that work? Was that good? Was that not good? You know, so there's great benefit in the learnings that are happening here. Additionally, make sure that you're really thinking about, how would I want to leverage a virtual workforce in the future? Is this something that, again, when the world returns to normal, is this a benefit that I want to offer to employees on a more long term? And what I mean by that is, I know, you know, there's some organizations that say, you know, up to 2 days a month you can work from home. You know, so somebody's coming to fix the oil burner, I'm just going to work from home that day. And this is a great way for you to sort of test if that's possible. It gives your folks the ability to work during times when it might be difficult to get to work. It's also helpful, you know, there's organizations who maybe they're growing but they don't have the office footprint. And is there the opportunity to deploy more experienced staff to work at home occasionally in order to free up workspace in the office? Believe it or not, there are productivity gains here without the distraction of being in the office. It was funny, I used to lead a call center for Athena Health. I led their call centers both here in Maine and overseas in the Philippines. And here in Maine, for my first 2 years leading the call center, we absolutely insisted we didn't want to have people work from home because number one, it was going to be a culture killer. And number two, we were very concerned that people were not going to be as productive. And we could not have been more wrong. We ended up deploying a team of remote folks who were handling calls from our hospital clients. And the productivity figures were actually, they were more productive outside of the office because they did not have the hallway conversations, the person walking by their desk and stopping. And they were, during their working hours, extraordinarily productive and actually outpaced our in-office staff, which of course then we worked to address. But it was a big win for us. And then the other win is this increased employer-employee trust. Listen, employer-employee relationships are based 100% on trust. And it all starts there. And if you say to me, Jill, I value your work and I trust that when you're at home, you're working just as hard as you are in the office. As an employee, I feel trusted and respected. And that goes a long way when I think about what kind of organization I want to work for. We all know the challenges, you know, the connectivity, the isolation, potentially reduced collaboration, communication challenges and misunderstandings, because we all know sometimes we can fire off something in a chat or in an email that could get perceived very, very differently from how I could communicate to it verbally. So we know those challenges are there, but there's also some benefits here that I think are really, really something that we should all look at as teams and as employers and as members of the community and say, what can we learn from this? And how can we, you know, leverage these types of, this type of work as a way to continue to provide flexibility for the people whose efforts we manage and lead. Just a couple other things that I want to open up for other discussion. You know, in resources we've talked about Zoom. Oh, sorry, Siri's talking to me. You know, we talked about web conferencing. There's Zoom, there's WebEx, there's Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of, you know, I seem to get a new one every day. Hey, have you tried our video conferencing technology? Zoom is the one that seems to be, I'm seeing the most of right now because it is free if you're hosting the smaller team meetings, and then it's a relatively low cost option. We talked about the collaboration and the instant messaging tools, Facebook, Slack, Microsoft Teams. And then there's this, you know, just communication itself. How do you create visuals? How can you keep your team engaged? And one of the things that, you know, some organizations are doing is using things like picture collages and asking everybody to take a picture of you sitting at your workspace and then let's send around a team picture. Or the company Instagram is now, you know, our employee of the day is Joe and here's what he's doing, as ways that you can communicate with folks and use visuals as opposed to just words and that sort of thing. So those are just a couple of, you know, just different resources that you can use. There's also, you know, a ton of information on, you know, the internet about managing virtual teams, about, you know, keeping folks engaged. And, you know, you just need to let your fingers do the walking. Obviously, this is something that I can help with. If you need more help, you can always give me a call. I would encourage you, the place to start is take a look at my blog. I've written several blogs about managing virtual teams, about how to recognize and inspire people from afar, or how to create cultures, even if everybody's not in the same room. So certainly I would tell you that there is no shortage of information and resources out there. And the other part is to share information. if you're doing something in your organization that is working really well and keeping your team engaged and inspired and excited, share it with others who you know are in that similar role in other organizations, because I think that, you know, I'm always looking for fresh ideas. I had a friend this morning who sent me a link to this course that's offered by Yale University called The Science of Well-Being. And they're offering it free online. And, you know, I think you can pay $50 and get the certificate, or you could take it for free and you don't get a certificate. But those are the types of things that, you know, are getting shared between, you know, individuals and on social media that can help folks to continue to learn and grow in their roles, and be productive, and also share ideas and collaborate. And then finally, the last thing that before we get into questions is that, you know, make sure that you're that you know, you keep laughing. I always joke that during these stressful times, it can be so easy to get just sort of bogged down in all the difficult stuff. So if you have things that you're following on Instagram or Twitter or on Facebook that are funny and they're appropriate, share them with your team. You know, there's a video on YouTube called A Conference Call in Real Life, which I've sent to everybody this week because it is like indicative of every conference call I've ever been on. You know, it's basically a skit which sort of makes all the things that go wrong with conference calls very, very real. I've been, you know, talking to folks about, you know, following things like quarantine karaoke, which is on Facebook right now, which is people in their living rooms singing songs, which is making people smile. Bob Marley's Facebook page, I've sent out some of those that are appropriate to people that I work with as an opportunity. There's a guy named Nick Heath on Twitter who is a rugby commentator who is now commentating things in real life, which is hilarious to hear a rugby commentator commentating people crossing the street. And if it just gives somebody on your team just a little smile and brightens their day, that could be a big boost for folks. So just think of those ways that you could share joy with your teams.
I'm sorry, and I'm going to interrupt you briefly.
Yeah,
So we're losing a couple folks because the governor is doing an address to the state and a little later than normal today. We've been trying to schedule these webinars past her 11:30 briefing time, and then she mixes things up on us. I suppose she's busy. And so, you know, I absolutely, folks can stay until 2:30 like they planned. I just wanted to break in for a couple seconds as folks are leaving and say, we're going to make this webinar available to you. It was recorded so that we can share that with you. And Jill, I think a couple of your slides or some of your tips that you shared today is something that we would love to get out on a social post. If you did one, then we'd be happy to share that and promote it. But we're hearing from a lot of folks about some of these tips and tricks. And so I think it would be really great to be able to have something from you and inspireal that we were able to share either in our newsletter or on our laadapts.com site, which is a new site we put up with business and community resources. And I can throw that link in the chat bar so folks can follow it. But we'd be happy to get this out beyond just today's audience. Even just a top 5 things to remember with managing a team would be a really great list from you, Jill. And I know you'd be up to the challenge.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks everyone who was able to join. And I'll shut up again and let you guys, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and ask some questions. I think that's at the point that Jill's at now. Scott maybe has a question? Were you just waving and saying hello?
Stop saying goodbye. I've got loan stuff to do.
Thanks. Keep our clients happy.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Bye, Scott.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm throwing the LA Adapts down in the chat function for folks if they want to check that out.
What is that?
Yeah, so if you're a business that has changed your hours or your type, so we're thinking of restaurants who moved to takeout or curbside, folks who are doing delivery. If you're now offering delivery for your basic product, we have a bookstore now that's delivering surprise boxes of books. There's a business directory where you can list it, and it's crowdsourced, and it's a way for us to promote who is open and who is doing things. We also have some great resources for community, from everything from food and food security to school and learning items, as well as a lot of the federal documents that are coming out and some of the changes to employment law and to business law and to the Family Leave Act. And all of that is under the business resources. So you can find that. It's our attempt at adapting and making sure we're sharing with folks what they need. Yeah, that's where these webinars will be listed as well. So, and you'll get a follow-up email from registering today that thanks you for attending, shares a direct link to inspireal and any of the information that Jill would want to share, as well as the link to the webinar.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's so great to see the chamber leading in this manner, because I think people are hungry for information and those resources. So it's really helpful. I will throw in a plug. It is the Great American Takeout today. So
Takeout Tuesday.
Takeout Tuesday. So I've already ordered my chicken from Primo in Rockland, which I'm going to pick up later, which I'm very excited about. And I think those are the types of things that will bring us together. And starting even small grassroots things like this can just help during what is no doubt a stressful time.
Yeah, we think.
And if anybody needs a puzzle, I'm shipping puzzles because I'm burning through like a puzzle every 2 days. So if anybody needs a puzzle, just reach out via
We'll
email.
remember that. I might take you up on a puzzle at some point. Jill, I can't thank you enough for making your expertise and your humor available to folks. There's it's a fast-moving world, and I've been impressed with my own team. I've got 5 generations represented on my team, and we have adapted to virtual meetings and online. One of the things that I found really helpful is sending a morning check-in email. I don't require a FaceTime, or we do that on Monday, but just letting folks know what the priority is for the day and what our goals are. I know that's kind of business specific, but it's so fluid, and my team is really focusing on different things or contacting different member segments that I think it helps just for everyone to know what each other is working on during the course of the day. And I think it's made a big difference, and my team has done amazing things like pulling off that website in 10 hours flat, calling, dozens and dozens of our members to see how they're doing and what they need, pulling together 5 webinars in, within 48 hours, including listening sessions with our congressman. And that's, we have one of those at 3 today for employers, and then we have another one for employees who have had a change in their working conditions on Thursday. So it's amazing what people can do when they pull together, and I don't spend a day where I'm not aware and grateful and extending my gratitude to the fine folks that I work with and the members we work for. Just saying. Okay, well, I think that, Shannon, I'm going to get just sort of some stuff over to you later today, and then that sounds great. Include that, and then obviously, anybody who is on who has my contact information, if they want more specifics or anything like that, they can always reach out as well. Thanks. Include any links that you would want us to drive for, any documents or slides from this that you'd like us to share, and we'd be happy to get it out. Okay, great. Thanks again, Jill. You were our first registered webinar with this crisis happening, and you were quick to adapt because we missed our startup Saturday. So we'll be figuring that out in the weeks to come. But either way, we're grateful for you guys joining us. Millie and Heidi, you have a lovely night.
Thanks, ladies. Take care. Jill, see you tomorrow.
Thanks. Take care.